There are many different models which really claim that we have different intelligences and different kinds of intelligences, but what makes Howard Gardner's model so powerful is that he's backed it up with research from varying fields, including anthropology, cognitive psychology, developmental psychology, psychometrics, biographical studies, animal sociology, animal physiology, and even neuroanatomy. He established that there were specific requirements that intelligences had to meet in order to be able to be part of his theory. First, we really want to notice that each intelligence really can be symbolized. So the theory of multiple intelligences suggests that the ability to symbolize or depict ideas and experiences through representations like pictures, numbers, or words is a hallmark of the human intelligence. So we want to say that there are different ways that each intelligence can be symbolized. For example, logical mathematical thinkers would use numbers and Greek letters along with other symbols to really serve their needs. Musicians, on the other hand, typically use notes of the bass or treble clef, and those will symbolize the melodies and the rhythms. We can use complex gestures and expressions for the kinesthetic intelligence, or freedom and loneliness as symbols. There are also social symbols such as waving goodbye and symbols of the self that we really might find more in the interpersonal and interpersonal intelligences. Each intelligence also has its own developmental theory and history. Intelligence isn't some absolute trait that we've really fixed at birth, but something that remains stable throughout lifespan, as some conservative adherents really would say they are. However, in the MI theory provided by Gardner, we realize that each intelligence really emerges at a certain point in childhood, and it's going to have periods of potential blossoming during a lifespan, and contains its own pattern for either a gradual decline or rapid decline, or even a great ability for it to grow. So we want to look that there could be great developmental patterns. The logical mathematical intelligence, however, really has a different developmental program or pattern. It arises somewhere later in childhood, and it's going to peak in early adulthood, and it actually will decline. So we want to see, however, that there have been actually very few major discoveries made in the logical mathematical thinking intelligence that were made after the age of 40. However, each of these intelligences does have its own patterns of growth and decrease during a life cycle. Each intelligence is part or invulnerable to being impaired, either through insult or injury or negativity, or even can be harmed through a injury to the brain itself. So the multiple intelligences theory predicts that intelligences are actually isolated in brain damage. So Howard Gardner suggested that in order to be viable, a theory of intelligence must be biologically based. That means it really had to be physiologically rooted within the brain itself. And so we want to see that this really is true. So we can see that there were 7 intelligences that really could be impaired in the brain, and these were the 7 original intelligences which were proposed by Howard Gardner. So we want to be able to say that also individuals possessing these brain lesions might really have difficulty, especially if you have some in that right temporal lobe, you're going to experience difficulty with musical tasks, but you'd still be able to read or write with ease. So the theory of intelligence argues that the existence of these 7 intelligences really is autonomous brain systems. As an example, the linguistic intelligence really functions primarily in the left hemisphere. The musical, spatial, and interpersonal is more right hemisphere. The kinesthetic intelligence is in that motor cortex, and the frontal lobes are part of that personal intelligence. So although our brain is very complex and it can't be mapped out really in different sectors, the MI theory really synthesized in a remarkable way much of what's already been discovered through the neuropsychology, neuroanatomy, and the brain itself. Each intelligence has its own culturally valued purpose, so we're going to declare that intelligence behavior can be viewed by looking through a civilization's accomplishments. So we want to look beyond just that normal IQ test, because the IQ test really focuses more on the verbal logical, and it focuses on that spatial or the mathematical logical, not the spatial. We want to be able to look at what really does get passed on from generation to generation. And this is really typically going to be myths, legends, literature, music, art, scientific discoveries, and even physical skills. And our multiple intelligence says that we really best learn when we are studying the example of the culture's most accomplished work in each of these areas. We want to look at how we celebrate diversity, and this really is a celebration of the MI theory because it's going to approach different cultures and show intelligent behaviors. So rather than just focusing on the verbal and logical discoveries of white Europeans, it's going to look at a broad spectrum of human intelligence. We're going to honor those intelligences that come from around the world, whether that be the songs of Nigerians, or we're going to look at the special mapping abilities of other cultures and that spatial ability as well. Also, every intelligence has a cognitive process, and this is going to occur in areas of memory, attention, perception, and even problem solving. So even though you may not have a memory for melodies, you may have one for faces or numbers. So we really want to be able to look at how these 7 intelligences have their own evolutionary histories. We're going to look at how they have grown. For instance, a musical intelligence may have evolved from a bird song while a hunter was trying to imitate the bird song in order to really call that prey toward them. We want to be able to use these quantifiable data to support the 7 intelligences through psychological testing and experimental research. And the theory of multiple intelligences now has become more than just an idea. It is really a synthesis of the most up-to-date research on the topic of intelligence.